Hello, folks. I'm Lieutenant Jake Crawford with the Dawson County Sheriff's Office, and welcome to this edition of the TheFuzzFeed. Joining me today is Sergeant Misty Harbin. She is one of our investigators. She is actually over property crimes, the evidence room, and pretty much anything else that Captain Ray Goody tells her to take charge of. So, Misty, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
So we brought Misty in today because this podcast, we're going to answer a lot of the questions that y'all have asked. Sorry, there's been a big delay in answering these questions, but hey, reality is we got a lot going on here at the Sheriff's Office. It's been pretty busy this first part of the year for us, especially from my end, training-wise. So, but Misty, knowing a lot about property crimes, there's a lot of questions that were asked about certain crime trends, and so Misty is way more qualified than me to answer some of these questions. I do have to take a minute. I need to give a shout out to my niece Emma, all the way out on the other side of the country. I'm not going to say the state, but apparently she discovered the podcast and has kind of enjoyed it. So I want to take a moment to say, hey Emma, we miss you.
Hey, Emma.
And Misty says hi too. And hopefully we get to see y'all here at some point. But we'll move into what everybody is going to tune in and ask about. So first question starting out is asking about the opioid crisis here in Dawson County. Statistics, things like that. So I'll kind of roll that over to Misty and we'll just kind of bat this one back and forth.
So I think that since, the downturn of COVID, we have started to see an uprise, and I guess that's just because people are getting out more, going back to the doctor, and things like that, getting prescriptions. So that we see a rise in overdoses and such as that. The more that people are out and about and have the capability to interact with family and friends and coworkers and strangers and all of those things.
Yeah, so from my end, where I see is I manage our Narcan program. Narcan is basically the antidote for opioid-specific overdoses. It blocks those receptors when it's administered and brings the person back. It's kind of a temporary fix. They can have more administered en route. Sometimes multiple doses are administered initially on scene until you can get them to that advanced life support care at the hospitals. Where I see is we get usage tracking forms submitted to me, and I forward them up to the state. And it does seem, and Misty, you can kind of tell me back, support me or disagree with me on this. They'll kind of come in waves. And again, Dawson County's, I know to the people who lose somebody to opioid overdose, obviously one is too many, and we get that. But speaking as a whole, as a county, it could definitely be so much worse. There's counties that can't go a 12-hour shift without, somebody dying from an opioid overdose. So Dawson County is definitely, we're doing good. The majority of our Narcan is administered. It results in a revival, which is a good thing, right? Life is preserved, but it seems to run in waves, right? 1, 2, or 3, sometimes 4 usually is what we see, and it seems to just come in spurts, and I would probably attribute that to a certain narcotic that's being sold at that given time that has probably like a higher concentration of fentanyl in the mix. I don't know what your opinion of that is.
Pretty spot on with that, and it also correlates with the seasons where you see where people tend to be more depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Wintertime, holidays, especially around Christmas and things of that nature, and it goes along with mental health and more folks getting treatment or not getting treatment and self-medicating. Well, we do have a resource that was recently put out on the Sheriff's Office Facebook page. Some folks may be familiar with the crisis hotline, and they've got a new program available where you can just call from a landline or cell phone, and the number is just simply 988. And it's available to anyone in the United States, and they even have specific resources for veterans in crisis. So when you call 988, not 911, unless you need emergency help, but 988 if you are a veteran in crisis. If you push the number 1, then they can get you specific help.
So that's great. And on a side note to this is also it's for people who have substance abuse issues, but also people who are having suicidal thoughts. Definitely, I can speak from my personal experience of having come from another agency down around the Metro Atlanta area. I don't ever remember working a suicide down there, and I don't know if it's the times these days, if it's jumped up across the board, but that is one area where we do see a fairly high call volume between threats, suicidal ideations, and then actually suicidal attempts. So definitely, if you have a family member who you think may be suicidal, be direct, approach them about it. Don't beat around the bush. Don't say, are you okay? Are you having had thoughts? Be direct. Are you thinking about harming yourself? Have you thought about killing yourself? Be very direct with them when you ask these questions. Put aside the whole, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't want to make it weird, right? You need to be direct with this stuff, because it's a lot easier to deal with somebody being a little insulted by the question that, are you actually wanting to harm yourself, as opposed to attending their funeral later on and wondering, or having those thoughts of, survivor's guilt. Like, I knew it. I knew something was wrong. I knew something was off, right? So just don't be afraid to ask those hard questions sometimes, and be very direct with people. So we're going to move on from that one. We'll move into another question we received. Again, this is a little dated, but it's a question about the sheriff's office and where are we most stretched for resources. So in speaking with the sheriff and multiple members of the agency on this, ultimately the biggest place across the board, not just for our agency, but any law enforcement agency, is going to be personnel. Personnel is a huge issue, and not just personnel, but I'd say qualified personnel. And again, I'm not trying to insult anybody. Everybody's got to start somewhere, right? But like Misty, how long does it take you to get a decent grasp of your job in CID and to become, I'd say, proficient at it, right? About how long would you say?
Well, I've been in CID for almost 4 years, and I think every day there's still something to learn. I mean, there's new varieties of or variations of crime that arise every day. So I really think that you could be here 10 or 20 years and still not know all there is to know.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a whole lot of courses in just getting a new investigator spun up and trained up. CID, our Criminal Investigation Division, they have a training program that each new officer to CID has to go through, right?
Yes.
And there's classes they have to attend. There's types of calls they have to work. So there's all these boxes that have to be checked. That just at a, how do I want to say this? Just at a minimum standard level, that boxes that have to be checked off. And again, as Misty said, that's still. Every day you're learning something new. I mean, there's so many avenues. There's so many tools out there. Sometimes new tools, whether it's digital forensics, actual crime scene processing. You're the expert here, so
Yeah, there's new training coming available almost every day for each different each variety of crime, whether it be thefts, burglaries, motor vehicle thefts, financial crimes, especially the financial stuff, because we're not only looking at, the thefts of credit cards and identities and checks or just cash out of someone's wallet. We're looking at Bitcoin and various digital and cryptocurrency. And, that's a huge learning curve for some of us who don't use those things. And it has to be worked a very specific way. And so there's a lot more computer forensics that we are having to get more and more into. And it's a lot less hands-on and a lot more computer-related crimes these days, because you can do a lot of damage in persons crimes and property crimes just over the computer.
Well, I'm truly thankful for people like Misty, because that is not me. My technological advance stopped with the Game Boy. I'm talking about the old one with the little screen. It's green and black,
Or like rectangle.
Yeah, I may have left mine in a security patrol vehicle in Alaska. May have been hiding it for post checks. It's fine. Somebody buys a vehicle one day from the military and they find a Game Boy in there. It's mine. I'd like to have it back. So resources that we're really stretched on is obviously personnel. Qualified personnel is always great. And how do we get good people? We get good people. Obviously, the initial attraction, everyone wants to know, well, how much do I make, right? Well, I won't say everybody, but most people, right? What are the benefit packages? Things like that. That's how you draw people in. The commissioners did really good this past year. They did give us a good pay bump. Unfortunately, what we're seeing now is just like every other business out there, our pay bump came in. Now everybody else, all the other businesses,
a competition.
Yeah, it's really is a competition. They start bumping up numbers. Even competitions come from law enforcement agencies, but even businesses outside law enforcement, they become more competitive. This is a high liability profession, and people start going, man, is it really worth, X amount of dollars an hour for me to risk, my freedom, my finances, all that, if there's a mistake on the job. So in securing additional personnel, staying competitive is going to be a huge edge. And I know our sheriff is working with the board of commissioners right now to try and see what the county can do, right? Because we all understand budgets aren't limitless, right? And it can't all be expended in one place. We also started a recruiting effort. The recruiting effort, there's approximately 4 of us here at the sheriff's office, and through Facebook, when people reach out to us, we're actively contacting them, finding out why they're interested in Dawson County. If they end up going somewhere else, hey, what was the deciding factor for you? So we can kind of try to adjust fire and learn from that. But really, just trying to get additional personnel is huge for us. So moving on from personnel or from the resources, our biggest thing is personnel, and that's how we stay competitive through recruiting, done through our end, and then hopefully working with the commissioners, we can stay competitive pay-wise, benefits-wise. So what training do our officers get in order to stay proficient in unarmed combat? So unarmed combat, we refer to it as defensive tactics, right? Probably roughly the same thing, just different name, if you will. Now, I will say that the unarmed combat brings to mind more of a military mindset, and military has a lot more latitude and rules of engagement, right? As officers, our number one goal is to resolve situations with least amount of injury to ourselves and suspects, victims, whatever, right? So recently, myself and 2 other sheriff's office employees, we just completed a course with a private entity. They put on a defensive tactics course, instructor course. The state does one as well. They're currently kind of in the process of revamping theirs right now. It's very hard to get in there, though. They run one a year, so it's super competitive to get in. So by completing this training, we will be doing more and more defensive tactics in service classes. We're also currently looking at ways to run possibly open mat nights for our officers, or mornings and evenings, to give them an opportunity to come in and train more. There's no doubt that being able to be comfortable, be confident, utilizing your hands to deal with situations is great. It won't solve every situation. We always have to realize that. We also have a lot of tools on our belts, or vests, depending on what you're wearing, to help stop the threats, right? And whether that's tasers, OC spray, aspeton, control techniques, reaching out, grabbing hold of somebody, however we can. So basically we've gotten 3 new defensive tactics instructors, to include myself. Prior to that, we ultimately had 2, and they're both higher up in the chain, and so availability was really a problem for them. So we're trying to step our game back up and really get this defensive tactics program rolling. Let's see. When the Moonshine Festival is in town, do you notice an increase in arrests? Misty, what's been your experience in that?
Not necessarily an increase in arrests. The good thing about the Moonshine Festival, it is fairly contained, and it's become more and more so over the years. So the majority of any incidents that occur within the festival are handled by the Sheriff's Office employees employed to work the festival. And I mean, I will say that it doesn't seem to bring in any additional crime. We have had over the years where a couple of the vendors' trailers have been broken into, but it was more along the lines of food items. But as far as the numbers go, compared to any other time of the year, there's no real substantial increase. And if anything, I think the continued more controlled environment that it has become over the years, the better it's gotten. The road hazards are less. The accidents, vehicle accidents or wrecks seem to be decreased during that time, and things such as that. So
I agree. So I guess along those lines, when would you say that certain crimes do pop up? Like let's say entering autos.
Well, historically, any kind of property crime tends to vary on a seasonal basis. For years, it was solely based on more of the spring, summer, fall, winter holiday seasons. But 2019 and the COVID era kind of put a damper on that and changed the trend quite a bit. So we're starting now that COVID is kind of on I wouldn't say the downslide, but it's not as perpetual in people's lives as it was for a while. We're starting to get back to more normal numbers. So as far as entering autos, they kind of tend to go alongside with burglaries, which is more of a seasonal trend, a summer trend. They'll peak in the summer months because people are away from home. They're out shopping more. Vehicles are parked in parking spaces more. People are in their vehicles more, so they tend to leave more valuable items in their vehicles, forget their keys in their vehicles, which corresponds with motor vehicle thefts, which have also spiked nationwide since COVID started. But motor vehicle thefts tend to be a little more opportunistic. So it will generally start out as an entering auto, and then keys are left in the vehicle. The vehicle is worth more as parts than it is as a vehicle. So since during COVID, the numbers were kind of skewed, at least here a bit, for entering autos and shopliftings, burglaries. Unfortunately, when we do the numbers for those, they're all intertwined. So I think a lot of what we see in our numbers is shopliftings, especially at the outlet mall, which we know those are not generally locals, and Walmart, which tends to be locals. So we have seen a substantial decrease since the decline in COVID, people going back to work, people aren't unemployment. Unemployment is also another factor in the uprising of thefts. So if we see a season where more people are unemployed, we see a season of higher burglaries, thefts of various items from properties such as trailers, lawn equipment, heavy equipment. We've seen quite a substantial amount of that in our county recently, and that's because of the uprise in the economy. But those are some local and some not. But they do tend to follow a more seasonal trend. Frauds, not so much, which will kind of take you into, what we're seeing a lot of now, which is phone scams. We've received quite a few phone calls regarding specific named employees from our sheriff's office calling citizens and telling them that there's a warrant for their arrest, and if they pay this amount of money over the phone, then the warrant will be dismissed, or they won't be arrested. We will never call you and tell you that you have a warrant for your arrest, and we will never ask you for money in order to alleviate your warrant or for you to not be arrested. So if you do receive that phone call from any agency, sheriff's office, the IRS, the federal government, police departments, the GBI, none of us are ever going to call you and say those things to you. And it kind of also corresponds with the scams as far as Microsoft is a big one we see. If Microsoft calls you and says that your computer has been compromised and they need to backdoor in, well, Microsoft is never going to call you and tell you that. So if you have a feeling and your gut is generally right that you might be being scammed, ask questions. Don't give them any information. Ask them for your information. If they can't tell you who you are, what account you hold with them, what your account number is, what activity is happening, things of those nature, then it's probably a scam. You can always ask for their callback number and disconnect the call, Google the number. If the number that you find is not the correct number, don't call them back. It's a scam. Don't provide anyone that you don't have an account with any of your banking information, your personal information, your driver's license number, your social, even your bank. If you were to call your bank and they want your social, you don't have to ever provide your entire social. Your last 4 digits are adequate. But again, generally, if you have an actual account that has been affected and your bank calls you, they're going to be able to prove they are your bank. And so it is okay to ask questions and question whoever's calling you as to why they're calling you and see what information about you that they already have. And if it doesn't feel right, then hang up and do your research. Call back the business number that you find and inquire into whatever fraud you're being called about. As far as reporting these things, It's not necessary to report these types of scams to the sheriff's office unless you are victimized. If you if you do not fall victim to the solicitations, then it's not necessary to report those things. But if you do fall victim to these phone predators, then by all means file a report, contact your bank, contact the fraud departments at the credit bureaus, and take steps to protect yourself and your identity. Generally, these people are not even in the United States. 99.9% of the time, they are working from outside the United States, where they may have contacts that they don't even know that they have recruited through these backdoor websites, and they will be in various states. So if you send them money, if we were to work the case, we may see that money was transferred to 4 different banks in 4 different states. So it's truly almost never locals who are scamming you. It's generally people in other countries. And we also have issues with out-of-state banks with being able to get cooperation from them, because they're not required to respond to our legal process, meaning our Georgia legal process, as far as search warrants, subpoenas, anything of that matter. So
if somebody calls you asking for money or tells you you're under arrest over the phone,
hang up.
Yep, just hang up, right?
Yes.
It's don't give them any information. It happens a lot. That's why we're wanting to push this out and make sure that people don't fall victim to it. So I believe we've made it through all the questions we currently have today. So we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Misty, thank you so much for sitting in here today. I know you had a lot of fun, right? Folks, you guys like it, you enjoy it, please send us more questions or topics that you want us to cover. Send them to TheFuzzFeed at DawsonCountySheriff'sOffice.org.
There's no office. It's just DawsonCountySheriff.org.
You're going to have to edit that part, yeah. So I'll start that over again. I'll never get it right. I need a teleprompter. So, okay, get it back under control. So if you guys enjoyed the podcast, you want to see more, send us questions, send us topics you'd like to get more information on. We'll try and get subject matter experts in if we don't have it at TheFuzzFeed. Sorry.
At DawsonCountySheriff.org.
Yes, TheFuzzFeed at DawsonCountySheriff.org. Sorry. I'm telling you, I need a teleprompter, okay?
Cue cards.
Cue cards, yeah. We can't afford a teleprompter right now, but cue cards definitely in the budget. I'm going to need Matthew to hold something up real tall in the back to be able to read. I'll be reading like this.
Well, then he'll have to grow for it to be real tall.
We'll get him a step stool.
Okay. You'll probably be able to see it then.
That's fine. So anyways, all right. Thanks for joining the Fuzz Feed. See y'all next time.